This is a question that I get asked from time to time. Some people will ask me, Chris, what's the uh, biggest ranking factor when it comes to SEO these days? I obviously got to make sure in the video, just in case anybody watches this video like 3 or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, let it be known that this video was made in 2019, because whatever the most important ranking factor is right now is obviously going to change. But I came up with the idea because I was reading an article on Search Engine Roundtable, where they were covering Google's John Mueller. John Mueller is basically one of Google's main spokespeople when it comes to search engine optimization in terms of communicating with the industry, the SEO industry. So one of the things that John Mueller said recently in one of his chats was that people that do SEO focus too much on links. And I kind of tend to agree with that. For years, people would focus on link building and say that links would be the single biggest factor. And for a lot of years, that was true, especially during the heyday, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when people were buying links, and that was the main way to get somebody really good rankings. So Google started doing away with that back in 2011 and 2012. They started clamping down on it. But still to this day, people focus on the short-term version of link building, which is doing black hat stuff. Black hat being an industry term for stuff that the search engines don't like you to do. You have white hat and black hat sort of. I never watched the show, but I hear that it's a reference to the Mad TV segment where they have the white hat versus black hat, spy versus spy. I've never seen it myself, but I hear that's where it comes from. So you have white hat techniques are techniques that the search engines they prefer you going with and encourage you to go with. Black hat is stuff that they don't want you to do, but you do it anyway because you want to try and rank on the search engines. So a lot of people still to this day will do black hat stuff, use black hat techniques to try and get links. And then there's other people out there that do the expensive type of link building, which is the white hat approach. And that has more to do with relationships, building relationships, and trying to get links that way on, to help their SEO rankings out. So what do I think is the biggest ranking factor in 2019? Do I think it's link building and links? I do not. I actually think that content is the number one ranking factor that's out there, and I think that way for a couple of different reasons. I think right now with search engine optimization, the best way to move the needle as of right now is with content, specifically focusing on what are called long tail keywords that don't get searched for that often, but because of the lack of competition, you can actually rank for a lot of them. And if you do a lot of them and put out content for a lot of them, it'll start to add up and make a difference, and you can get some decent results that way. That's the main thing. But even with the keywords that are popular, even with the keywords that get searched for the most, that get tons of competition, for anybody that's out there that wants to try and play the slot machine and try and hit the jackpot, content is still going to be the most important thing, because for two different reasons. Link building is changing dramatically because we're the past few years, and we continue to this day, we're going through a shift right now where more people will access the internet from their cell phone than the desktop computer. So let me ask you guys a question. If you're on your cell phone, how likely is it that you're going to share a link to somebody and say, hey, check out this content? Chances are you're probably not going to do that in terms of like copying a URL, copying a link, and then pasting it into whoever you're sending. It takes a lot of work. It's not easy to do. But with mobile, a lot of content these days gets shared with share buttons. There's different buttons that you can use to share content mobilely, and that's how a lot of people share content these days. So like the days of copy and pasting a link off a desktop computer, it just doesn't happen naturally that often. So the traditional link building doesn't really go on that much these days anyway. So therefore, it makes sense for Google to not put as much value in it if it's something that people are not doing as much. I really do think that Google does put some weight in the share buttons, but the share buttons can be manipulated. Google does put some value in link building, but they kind of do it in a natural way. What's the best natural way to get the best links to have the biggest value? It's by creating content that people actually want to look at, people actually want to read, content that people actually want to watch. And that's actually the best way to put out SEO, because if you put out really good content that's unique that people actually want to see, then they're naturally going to share it. They're naturally going to have people check it out. And Google's checking things like that on their back end. So if you really want to hit the jackpot and rank for a keyword that's super competitive, you have to put out a unique piece of content that your competition's not covering, content that your competition has not done or is not doing, something that people actually want to look at, something that people actually want to read. And that's really the best way to do it. Similar to me putting out content on various topics and subjects for a particular audience, which would be small business owners. The type of content that I'm doing is a pretty good example, where you have a ton of people in my industry, and sure, they'll put out videos and they'll say, hey, this is the biggest ranking factor and here's why, and they go into even more detail than I do. But their audience would be people in the industry. Their audience would be other people in marketing and advertising. My audience would be small business owners, so I'm not getting into too much detail. I'm not getting things too complicated here, and I'm not using jargon. I'm just I'm talking regularly. So that's my particular audience. So I have unique content for a particular audience. So the content is I humbly think that it's decent. I don't think it's terrible. And so that's the type of content that you want to come up with when you're doing search engine optimization, is that it's not just about, you could get, like, the search engine optimization work that we do at Custom Wave for most small business owners is pretty simple, where we focus on the long tail keywords. We put out a short sentence saying, hey, this business does this in this area for this keyword, and we do it in a blog format, and it's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of work and time in terms of doing the keyword research, and then it's just a little time consuming in terms of putting out the blog work. It's not too complicated, but that's what we do most of the time. For content like that, you can get away with putting one or two sentences out there and rank because there's no competition. But for the keywords that are most popular, you really have to have really unique content and good content in order to pop up for it, to have a chance of it. One more tip is that if you really want to rank for keywords that are popular, your best bet in terms of SEO is ranking on YouTube, because YouTube is growing in terms of how many people search on there for things, and there's really not a lot of competition that's out there. So if you want to rank on a search engine, consider doing YouTube, because there's a ton of potential. A lot of people would prefer watching video than going to a website, but the vast majority of small businesses that are out there, they put up a website, but they don't put up any video content. So there's an opportunity there. So that's what I think is the best ranking factor, which is content.